Watch this carefully, because in the next 30 minutes, something in you is going to shift. Not your intelligence in the academic sense. Not your ability to memorize facts or win arguments. Something far more dangerous than that. Your perception. Most people move through life half-aware. They take words at face value. They assume fairness is built into the system. They believe loyalty is automatic and trust is safe by default. And when reality contradicts those beliefs, they call it bad luck. They call it betrayal. They call it injustice. But they never question the framework that made them vulnerable in the first place. This is where the shift begins. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to dismantle the comforting illusions you were handed about people, power, and fairness. Not to make you cynical. Not to make you cold. But to make you precise. Because once you see the patterns underneath behavior, once you understand the mechanics behind manipulation and positioning, you stop reacting emotionally and start thinking strategically. You'll begin to reinterpret your past. Betrayals won't feel random anymore. Disappointments won't feel confusing. You'll see the incentives. The leverage. The quiet calculations happening beneath polite conversations. And once you see them, you cannot unsee them. There is a cost to this kind of clarity. You will feel different. More alert. Less trusting. More disciplined with your words and your loyalty. You may even feel slightly separated from those who still operate unconsciously, still believing the story instead of studying the structure. If you prefer comfort over clarity, this is your moment to leave. But if you're ready to move from naive observer to calculated thinker, stay. The first shift begins now. This is not a lesson in motivation. It is a recalibration of perception. Throughout this video, specific emotional triggers will be activated deliberately. Memories of betrayal will surface, not to reopen wounds, but to reinterpret them. Moments where you felt manipulated will return, this time with clarity. The quiet resentment you carry toward unfair outcomes will be examined, not emotionally, but structurally. Beneath all of it lies a deeper driver, the desire for control and the hunger to rise above those who move through life blindly. Each shift you encounter will redirect your focus. Words will lose their authority, and behavior will become your metric. Emotional reactions will give way to strategic calculation. Fairness will stop being an expectation and start being replaced by leverage. Trust will transform from assumption into pattern recognition. Passive living will dissolve into game awareness. By the end, the transformation is simple but permanent. You will no longer participate unconsciously. You will begin to position yourself deliberately. 7 mental shifts. Escalating intensity. A perspective you cannot unsee. And when it's over, you'll understand exactly why most people never reach this level of clarity. Shift 1. Words are performances. Behavior is truth. The first shift is simple, but it will immediately change how you listen. Words are performances. Behavior is truth. Most people treat language as evidence. If someone says they care, you assume they care. If they promise loyalty, you register them as loyal. If they apologize, you interpret it as change. But words are often crafted for effect, not accuracy. They are tools used to manage perception in the moment. Words cost nothing. They require no sacrifice, no discipline, no sustained effort. A person can promise you the future in a single sentence. They can swear commitment, express gratitude, or declare respect without investing a single action to support it. Language is cheap because it is flexible. It bends to the needs of the speaker. Behavior is different. Behavior requires energy. It requires time. It demands consistency. Someone who values you does not merely say it once, they show it repeatedly, especially when it is inconvenient. Someone who is loyal does not announce it, they demonstrate it under pressure. Someone who is sorry does not repeat the same mistake, they alter their pattern. Patterns expose intention. Not isolated moments. Not emotional speeches. Repeated actions over time. When you stop isolating words and start tracking behavior across weeks and months, confusion disappears. The mixed signals vanish. The contradictions resolve themselves. Think of how many times promises dissolved into silence. How often loyalty faded when circumstances changed. How many apologies were followed by identical behavior. The issue was never your interpretation. It was your metric. The strategic shift is this: stop reacting to what people say. Observe what they repeatedly do. Measure consistency. Let patterns, not phrases, define your conclusions. But even understanding behavior isn't enough. Shift 2, everyone operates from self-interest. Once you stop being hypnotized by words and start watching behavior, the next shift becomes unavoidable. Everyone operates from self-interest. Not occasionally. Not selectively. Always. This does not mean people are evil. It means they are wired for survival. Every decision, even the generous ones, passes through an internal calculation. What do I gain? What do I avoid losing? Sometimes the reward is obvious: money, status, access. Other times it is subtle: approval, emotional satisfaction, reputation, leverage. Even acts of kindness contain benefit. Helping someone can strengthen alliances. Sacrifice can reinforce identity. Loyalty can secure future reciprocity. The mistake is not that people act in self-interest. The mistake is pretending they do not. Betrayal feels personal because you assumed alignment. You believed someone would prioritize your outcome over their own. But when pressure increases, survival wiring activates. Hidden incentives surface. Priorities shift. What looked like loyalty was often conditional. What looked like devotion was often convenience. There is also the reciprocity illusion. You believe that because you would sacrifice, they will too. You project your internal code onto someone else and expect symmetry. When it fails, you call it deception. In reality, it was difference in incentives. This shift removes emotional shock. When someone chooses themselves over you, you stop reacting as if something unnatural occurred. You analyze it structurally. What did they gain? What did they protect? What did they fear losing? The strategic question becomes automatic: what does this person gain? In business, in friendships, in romance, in family dynamics. What is their upside? What is their risk? When you see the incentive, behavior becomes predictable. And once behavior becomes predictable, manipulation loses its power. But even if you understand motives, there's something deeper. Shift 3, fairness is a story, not a system. From childhood, you were taught a quiet promise: work hard, be good, and outcomes will align with effort. Fairness was presented as a built-in feature of reality. But fairness is not a system. It is a story. The real system rewards leverage. It rewards visibility. It rewards positioning and timing. Merit matters, but only when it is paired with exposure and influence. Talent without leverage is invisible. Effort without positioning is replaceable. Look at promotions, partnerships, recognition. The most deserving person does not automatically rise. The person who is seen rises. The person who is connected rises. The person who understands where power sits and aligns accordingly rises. Merit competes. Leverage decides. The emotional cost of believing in fairness is resentment. You waste energy asking why someone less qualified advanced. You replay injustices in your mind. You wait for correction, assuming the system will eventually rebalance. It rarely does. This is not cynicism. It is structural awareness. When you expect fairness, you operate passively. When you understand structure, you operate strategically. Detach from resentment. It drains focus. Instead of asking, "Is this fair?" ask, "How is this structured? Who holds decision power? What incentives shape the outcome? Where is leverage concentrated? What visibility is required?" The question is no longer whether you deserve something. The question is whether you are positioned for it. Once you adopt this shift, emotional reactions give way to tactical adjustments. You stop complaining about the board. You study it. And once you see the system clearly, you begin to understand something even more unsettling. Shift 4. The rules are not applied equally. Once you examine structure, another layer reveals itself. The rules you were told govern everyone do not operate evenly. Power determines how rules function. On paper, regulations look universal. Policies appear neutral. Laws seem impartial. In practice, enforcement is asymmetrical. Those with less leverage feel the full weight of consequences. Those with influence negotiate, reinterpret, delay, or absorb penalties as minor costs. This is not always dramatic corruption. Often it is subtle. A well-connected individual receives leniency. A visible high performer gets the benefit of the doubt. A powerful executive reframes a violation as a strategic risk. Meanwhile, someone without leverage is disciplined immediately for smaller infractions. Rules constrain the weak more than the strong because consequences scale differently. A fine that devastates one person is insignificant to another. A damaged reputation destroys one career while another survives through networks and alliances. The real variable is consequence calculation. Powerful individuals assess risk against reward. If the upside outweighs the manageable penalty, they proceed. They do not rebel recklessly. They navigate strategically. There is also a difference between legal leverage and social leverage. You may follow every written rule and still lose because someone else controls perception. Social positioning can override technical correctness. The strategic shift is not to become reckless. It is to become aware. Understand risk versus consequence. Ask who enforces the rule, who benefits from it, and who is shielded from it. Follow rules intelligently, not blindly. Some rules protect you. Others merely limit you while others maneuver freely. And once you accept this, you realize external systems aren't your only risk. Shift 5. Proximity is risk. The greatest threats rarely announce themselves. They do not arrive with hostility. They arrive with familiarity. Proximity is risk. Strangers have limited access to you. They do not know your insecurities, your ambitions, your blind spots. The people closest to you do. Access is power. The more someone knows about your goals, weaknesses, and patterns, the more leverage they hold. In competitive environments, this becomes obvious. A colleague congratulates you publicly while quietly positioning themselves for the same opportunity. A friend celebrates your progress but subtly minimizes it in conversation. A partner listens carefully, not always to support, but to measure. Information is currency. When you share prematurely, you hand over resources. Details about your plans, fears, and strategies become data points that others can use, intentionally or unintentionally. Sometimes the threat is not malicious sabotage. It is hidden rivalry. Someone who smiles while competing. Familiarity lowers your guard. You assume shared history equals shared loyalty. You mistake comfort for alignment. But jealousy grows quietly. Comparison happens silently. And when incentives shift, proximity turns into vulnerability. Watch how people respond to your success. Do they amplify it or redirect attention? Do they ask strategic questions or probing ones? Do they seem energized or subtly distant? The strategic shift is restraint. Limit disclosure. Reveal gradually. Test loyalty slowly through time and small stakes. Observe reactions before increasing trust. You do not need paranoia. You need discipline. Not everyone close to you is an enemy. But every enemy will try to get close. And the fastest way to invite attack is something most people are encouraged to do openly. Shift 6. Visible weakness lowers your leverage. You were told that vulnerability builds connection. In certain controlled environments, that can be true. But in competitive spaces, visible weakness lowers your leverage. Status perception shapes how people treat you. Whether consciously or not, others assess strength, stability, and capability before deciding how much respect to extend. When you publicly broadcast insecurity, confusion, or instability, you alter that assessment. You shift from competitor to liability in their minds. Not everyone will exploit that shift. But some will. Social predators exist in every environment. They look for openings, for pressure points, for moments where confidence cracks. What you reveal in a moment of emotional release can later become weaponized in a moment of tension. Think about arguments where past confessions reappear as ammunition. Think about workplaces where doubt spreads quietly once competence is questioned. Information about your internal struggles changes external perception, and perception influences opportunity. This does not mean you suppress reality. It means you choose your audience carefully. Vulnerability must be selective, not universal. There is a difference between trusted confidants and casual observers. Most people fall into the second category. The strategic shift is discipline. Work on weaknesses privately. Strengthen quietly. Seek counsel from those who have earned discretion. In public and professional spaces, display competence, clarity, and composure. You are not pretending. You are positioning. When people perceive stability, they treat you with caution and respect. When they perceive instability, they test limits. Guard your leverage. Guard your narrative. But even if you master all 6, there is one final realization that determines whether you remain reactive or become intentional. Shift 7. You are in a game whether you admit it or not. The final shift is the one that binds all the others together. You are in a game whether you admit it or not. Every social structure contains competition. Workplaces compete for advancement. Friend groups compete for influence. Networks compete for access. Even silence communicates positioning. Opting out mentally does not remove you from the board. It simply turns you into a passive piece moved by players who are fully aware of the dynamics. Passive living feels moral. You tell yourself you are above strategy, above politics, above calculation. But while you avoid deliberate positioning, others are building alliances, managing perception, and aligning themselves with opportunity. They are not necessarily malicious. They are intentional. Reputation management is not vanity. It is survival. How you are perceived shapes who trusts you, who competes with you, who protects you, and who sidelines you. Every interaction either strengthens or weakens that perception. Intentional positioning means understanding where influence sits and how decisions are made. It means thinking 1 or 2 steps ahead before speaking, committing, or aligning. It means recognizing that neutrality is rarely neutral, it is often interpreted as weakness or indifference. The strategic shift is awareness. Pay attention to perception, alliances, and timing. Observe who collaborates with whom. Notice where leverage concentrates. Move deliberately rather than impulsively. Playing the game does not require aggression. It requires clarity. It requires foresight. It requires choosing your moves instead of drifting into outcomes. Once you accept that the game exists, you stop being surprised by results. You stop reacting emotionally to patterns that were predictable. And when you combine this awareness with everything before it, something fundamental changes in how you move through the world. Now step back and look at what has shifted. Words no longer control your perception, behavior does. Motive is no longer mysterious, self-interest explains it. The system is no longer judged by fairness, it is measured by leverage. Rules are no longer assumed equal, they are understood through power. Relationships are no longer automatically safe, they are evaluated through access and risk. Weakness is no longer casually displayed, it is managed with discipline. And life itself is no longer random, it is recognized as a game with structure. These shifts interlock. Each one reinforces the next. When you watch behavior, you see incentives. When you see incentives, you understand structure. When you understand structure, you see how power bends rules. When you see that, you become cautious about proximity. When you manage proximity, you protect leverage. And when you protect leverage, you begin to move intentionally within the game. This is the new lens. Conversations sound different now. Praise feels lighter. Promises feel thinner. Opportunities look less emotional and more strategic. You start noticing patterns in rooms you once entered blindly. Nothing dramatic changed externally. The shift happened internally. But that internal shift alters every external outcome. And with that awareness comes a new identity forming beneath the surface, you see it now. Words are performances. Behavior is truth. Self-interest drives decisions beneath polite language. Fairness is not a guarantee, leverage determines outcomes. Rules bend around power. Proximity carries risk. Visible weakness lowers leverage. And whether you deny it or not, you are in a game. 7 shifts. None dramatic on their own. Together, irreversible. You will not listen the same way again. You will not trust the same way again. You will not interpret success, failure, loyalty, or betrayal the same way again. The lens has changed. And once perception changes, behavior follows. Most people will never make this shift. Not because they cannot, but because it is uncomfortable. It strips away comforting stories. It demands responsibility. It requires discipline. It removes the luxury of blaming randomness for predictable outcomes. Most people prefer comfort. You chose clarity. That does not make you cynical. It makes you informed. It does not make you cold. It makes you calculated. It does not isolate you from reality. It aligns you with it. There will be moments when you feel slightly separate from those who still operate on assumption and emotion. That separation is not arrogance. It is awareness. Clarity often feels lonely before it feels powerful. But power follows awareness. From this point forward, you will notice incentives in conversations. You will measure consistency instead of promises. You will evaluate structure instead of fairness. You will move with intention instead of reaction. If something shifted in you permanently, write this in the comments, I see the game now. Because once you see it, you stop being a piece and start becoming a player. And this is only the beginning. The next lesson goes deeper.